What is up, guys? Teddy Cornwell here. Welcome to the Underdog Talk, the world's most underrated podcast. And there's just something about the underdog. But I mean, you see him, and this time he really, I normally say muscles out. No, this guest really has his muscles out, tats out. I mean, the legendary fitness trainer, the one and only Mr. James Grage. What is up, big fella? How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, man. Hey, I appreciate the invite onto the podcast.
And I was telling James off air the reason I found him is because I actually did his resistance band workout over lockdown, and man, did that kick my ass. And thank the Lord, James also said he had difficulty on it because I felt like a real wimp doing it. But here we are, and we're here. But resistance bands, James was telling me, were really underestimated. And speak of an underdog workout, James, resistance bands are so key to just unlocking a different kind of workout. Now, I have to ask the $1 million question to you, sir. What inspired you to become, a fitness trainer, personal trainer, just overall health advocate?
That started really early. I happened to have a parent who was really into nutrition and always had a lot of books around that were kind of pioneered the space on supplementation. And so I was into working out really young. So I would thumb through some of these books and it just sparked an interest. And then some of it, I think it was just moth to a flame, so to speak, went into the gym and I never minded working hard. So just kind of applied that work ethic in the gym and saw results. And, anytime you do something and you see results from it, it becomes this self perpetuating thing. And it was honestly one of the first times in my life where I felt like I really had a good sense of control over my own life, over my destiny, if you will. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about training. It happens to be one of those things, one area of your life that you can take the reins and control. And from there, it's really transformative. It can obviously change your body, your confidence, so many different things. And so that's what I enjoyed sharing with people, helping someone get in really great shape or helping them get a six pack. Yeah, seeing that reaction of them getting in really great shape for the first time in their life, of course that was rewarding, but it was the bigger piece. It was watching how that would bleed over into other areas of their life. And I think that was the part that really got me charged up, because I like that side of it, more of the motivational side of it than just the technical side just of training, although I like that as well.
I love both sides, but I do see the motivational side. Now, obviously, kind of being a fitness trainer, you're in the forefront. People listen to you and listen to how to work out, how to, diet properly. What are your thoughts on kind of the importance of, both rest and recovery in a well-rounded fitness routine? How crucial are both of them combined, James?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people used to talk about overtraining, and that kind of became a big thing. Everyone repeating that, oh, you don't want to overtrain, you don't want to overtrain. And then all of a sudden, somehow it flipped around, and everyone said, oh, overtraining is not a thing, which is not true.
Yeah.
I, you know, you train hard, it's a stress to your body. And just like any kind of stress, just like even getting sick or, going through something traumatic, that takes a toll on your system. And if you do that repeatedly, obviously it starts to wear you down. So building muscle is this really interesting process of, breaking down and rebuilding stronger. And so it's that old saying, stimulate, don't annihilate. And I used to make that mistake when I was young. I would go in there and just think, all right, well, if a little is good, then a lot more must be way better. And so I would go in there and I would kill myself in the gym and made good progress. But through the years, I've learned that I could have gotten not only as good a results, probably better results doing a little bit less. Now, that doesn't mean you can just go through and kind of skip through your workouts. No, you still have to bring that level of intensity, but to your point, you have to have the rest on the other side of that, the recovery piece.
And obviously, as I was kind of talking about earlier, people, look up to you and follow what you do as a fitness expert. What are kind of some of the common misconceptions about exercise and nutrition that you encounter? And then how do you kind of address them? Obviously, you talked about the overtraining, and but we constantly see different misconceptions, and even just getting the right amount of protein in. I feel like I hear a different number every day, James. And what are the main misconceptions that you hear on a daily basis?
Well, you'd have to you'd have to go back and ask me that question for each decade because it changes.
Yes.
And it's interesting, having done this as long as I have, I'm able to almost see this 40,000-foot view of it and see these cycles, I kind of in their entirety, from one to the next. And, it used to be that people would just go into the gym and they would just sling a bunch of heavy weight. There was not a lot of emphasis on technique or form, being very disciplined, mind muscle connection, all these things that are very important. So I used to talk about some of those things early on in YouTube. I got into YouTube, I think it was 2009. You just didn't see a lot of that content, and continued that on into, 2015, 2016. You go on YouTube today and everything is about technique. This is wrong. Don't do this. Don't do that. And, the one thing that I've learned about fitness is nothing is that black and white. Uh, there's no, there's not necessarily a wrong way and a right way. In other words, a good example is partial reps versus full range of motion. Which one's going to build muscle? They both build muscle. I've known guys that like partial range of motion and they're huge. I've known guys that have done the opposite and they're huge. So there's not only one way to do it. It's kind of like saying, okay, there's only one path to the top of a mountain. So that's one of the things that is kind of hard for me right now, is watching all this and trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who's trying to learn right now, trying to filter through all that information and trying to decide, what do you believe? And there's not really a good centralized hub of information like there used to be. I'll give you a good example. So I worked for Muscle and Fitness magazine for a long time. And with Muscle and Fitness, our science editors were always a PhD. That was a requirement. I've got a good friend of mine. His name is Chris Lockwood. He eventually became the editor-in-chief of Muscle and Fitness, but that's why he eventually went and got his PhD, is because he wanted to become the science editor. And he couldn't have that job without that. So you knew that if something was published in the magazine, that at least it went through some sort of criteria, that there was some sort of filtering, that, to check for the accuracy of that information. And now we live in a world where everything is driven by social media, by Google searches, now even obviously AI. And all those things are driven by what's popular, not by what's accurate, right? Do a Google search. What's going to rank highest? It's not based on, accuracy or factuality. It's based on popularity. Same thing with social media. So you could have someone who's got a gazillion followers, doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. So I think it's really difficult for people to sort through all that noise right now, especially with so much conflicting information. I mean, if most of the people at least agreed, if there was like this Venn diagram, at least if that overlap was pretty big, you could say, okay, I'm going to ignore this stuff on the peripheral, and I'm going to focus on this stuff in the center here, where everyone seems to say the same thing. But everything's very polarizing right now. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And like I said, and it's so black and white, you don't do this, you have to do that. And then the other guy's saying the exact opposite.
And I hear so much. I hear from one bodybuilder, okay, well, I'm going to do heavyweight. And then another bodybuilder, I'm going to do lightweight, high reps. It's very ironic to a point. Now, you talked about the mind to muscle connection, James. What exactly is the mind to muscle connection, and how does one achieve it? I always feel like that's been a hard thing for me personally, to achieve a mind to muscle connection. I'm always like imagining my muscles contracting, and I don't actually fully understand what the concept is. Would you mind explaining a little more about that?
That's another one where it seems like everyone's got their own different definition of what it means, but here's what it means to me. Our body tries to recruit as many muscles as it can for a given task, right? If I need to pick up something off the floor, something heavy, then I'm going to use every bit of my overall strength to pick that object up. So if I want to sculpt a physique, say for bodybuilding, this isn't for athletic performance, it's not for powerlifting, but if I want to sculpt a physique, in other words, put muscle selectively where I want. In other words, I feel like my chest is good, but I want bigger shoulders, or I think my triceps are good, but I want bigger biceps. You have to override your body's natural tendency to recruit all those muscles, and you have to try to focus more. I don't really like the word isolate, but to target that area. A really good example of a muscle that I find a lot of people have a hard time getting that kind of mind muscle connection to really tune in is the lats. Not everybody. Some people naturally have big lats because they're able to kind of tune into that. Most people, when they're doing, say, lat pull downs, their arms, their biceps fatigue before their lats do. And that's because they're pulling with their biceps primarily. So, learning how to really feel that muscle. And I think one of the biggest things that helps people, actually, the bands are a great tool for that because it takes the ego part out of it. You're not worried about how much weight you're lifting anymore. And you can just focus on the movement and focus on really getting that strong contraction in the muscle. And that's what I'm going for. To me, that's what that mind muscle connection is. If I'm doing lat pull downs, do I feel that muscle contracting? Oh yeah, that's a nice peak contraction. As I get further into my set, do I feel, the lactate, what some people call lactic acid? Do I feel that starting to build up? So it's a feel thing. And if I were to give anybody advice on training, it's at least on that style of training, because again, that's the first question you should ask someone. What's your goal? Because I hear a lot of information back and forth. Someone saying, no bench press this way, no bench press this way. Well, what's your goal? Is it to build a physique, or is it to win bench press competitions? Because the technique's different.
Yeah.
Should I do deadlift? I don't know. Are you doing, again, doing a powerlifting meet? Well, then, yeah, you got to do deadlift to get better at deadlift. But even in sports, funny enough, they're not doing as much deadlift now. Because if you think about sports, the goal is to make someone stronger, also to help prevent injury. So the last place you want to create an injury is in the weight room as opposed to the field. But, that's my definition is, learning to really feel the muscle and not worrying about the weights, not worrying about, counting reps. It's not a math game, and it's not a competition against, the guy next to you. That's CrossFit. This is about just kind of getting into your own headspace. To me, it's almost a type of meditation.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not into Tai Chi, but if, you were to mix Tai Chi and weight training, yeah, somewhere in there.
I love that definition of the mind muscle connection. I see every point that you mentioned, and you talked about how fitness isn't black and white. Do you think kind of social media and the internet with all these different personalities has kind of, I don't want to say hurt the fitness industry, but do you think it's turned it in a different direction because there are so many people, and you talked about how so many people have different opinions?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I were to be blunt about it, I think the fitness industry has turned into a circus. And look on social media, you see, it's like if you were to take weight training and synchronized swimming and combine it, people doing like all these bizarre exercises, in pairs and, threesomes, and some guys over there like benching a sofa with a table balanced on top of it. And it's just gotten bizarre because people are looking for the clicks, the views, the subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's like, what are their intentions? What is it that they're really trying to do? Is their goal to garner that attention, or is their goal to really legitimately help people? And so I feel like if I'm going to help someone, then I have to put that other to the side a bit, right? It's not about me. It's not about the views. It's about providing good information. and not doing it in some clickbaity way by telling people, oh, you're doing it wrong. Like it's, this whole FOMO technique, like, oh my God, I do bench press like that. What am I doing wrong? I got to watch this video now. So, being honest with people, trying to be as objective as possible. I'm not going to say, hey, one way is, the only way to do it. Try to explore all those possibilities. I'll give my opinion on what I think about some of those different things, but I'm not going to say one thing is a fact, because what's a fact? I mean, I think fact is a stupid word. I don't even know what the word fact means, to be honest with you. Even in the world of science, what's fact? Come out with a study 10 years later, they got another study that says the other study was totally wrong. So I don't even know what fact means. So everyone throwing around, facts in the gym, I think is a little bit silly. I'll share my opinion though, for what it's worth, based on my own personal experience, my own training, helping other people, based on current science. I'll share my opinion. And that's where I think the delineation is. I don't mind people saying this is my opinion, even if I disagree with them. I'm like, that's cool. That's his opinion. And he's entitled to his opinion. Just don't tout it as fact.
I see that because it's so true, especially in the fitness industry. And you mentioned it multiple times. It's almost like every new method is changing. We used to think protein, you could only have this amount of grams. Now it's this amount of grams, and it's this. Next year it'll be something else. And, I truly love that. Now, obviously, the reason people, follow you is because you are real. You are, genuine. You have the research, you have the knowledge. Can you share some strategies for staying committed to a fitness routine, especially during busy or even stressful times, like so many Americans have busy lifestyles? And I think it's one of the problems we face in the fitness industry, where people will start a program, not finish it, or finish it and never do one again. So, James, how does one stay committed to that fitness routine, to the gym, and just stay on track for their goals?
Yeah, I had a lot of friends over at bodybuilding.com, and I went out there to Boise, Idaho to their headquarters once, and we were talking about building a new program, which we ended up building. It was called Rewired, and a lot of it focused on this. And it was addressing a challenge that they had, which was statistically 80% of the people that started programs with bodybuilding.com quit after 2 weeks. And they had some of the best training programs you could find anywhere in the world, with the top trainers from all over the world. So it wasn't a problem with the programs. It was people were having a hard time sticking to it. And, I tell people, give me any program. I don't care what it is. Give me the worst program and I'll still get results with it. Why? Because I'll apply a certain amount of work to that, right? Intensity. And I'll do it consistently over a long enough period of time, and it will still yield results, because especially resistance training, it's not rocket science. Everyone wants to make it out to be like so complicated. It's not. I mean, I don't know. Can I curse on here?
Please do.
Not to sound like a dick, but some of the most jacked dudes I ever knew were not the smartest guys. They weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to build muscle. We used to call everyone in the gym meatheads.
Yes.
Right? So you don't have to have a PhD in order to get in great shape. It doesn't need to be that complicated. And that's where I think, the industry has done everyone a disservice, is made it out to be so complicated. And I think that goes back to the problem that we're talking about, which is people staying committed. Imagine brushing your teeth every day and trying to watch a YouTube video of one person versus another person telling you the scientifically backed way to avoid getting tartar. And every day you tried to brush your teeth differently. Something as simple as brushing your teeth would be daunting. You're like, oh man, do I have to do it again? So the key, in my opinion, to making something sustainable, to do it long term, long enough to see results, is trying to make it simple so you can make it habitual. Because if I were to create a hierarchy of the very most important things down to the least important things, a lot of the sciencey bullshit is down here. Up at the very tip top of it is adherence, sticking to it. So let's address that first. If it's most important, then how do we address that? Okay, well, let's not make it overly complicated. Let's keep it relatively simple, right? That's step number one. As far as, other things I tell people, I'm like, look, you gotta prepare for the worst. It's kind of like hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Well, life happens. And, the reality is a lot of people start a program and they're like, okay, this is a lot to take on. I'm taking on this new nutrition plan. And now I've got to do this periodization program with my weight training. And now I've got to try to figure out, okay, am I going to do low intensity, steady state cardio, high intensity interval training? How am I going to weave all that together? That's a lot. So you're trying to absorb all this. Then all of a sudden something with life happens. And you're like, okay, all that's low priority. Let me address this. But the reality is this stuff happens always. That's just life. Yeah. Life is always going to throw us curveballs. So we have to be prepared for that. And we have to build our plan accordingly, which again, a lot of that goes back to simplicity. It's taking those things into account because they're not anomalies. It's not like one-off that just happens every blue moon. No, they're things that happen all the time. So to me, that's the key to, that consistency.
Yes.
And, if we talk about like, okay, well, why do people fall off? Why do they need so much motivation? Well, if you're trying to do all that, yeah, it does take a lot of motivation to do it. And the reality is motivation is fleeting. It's a fleeting feeling that comes and goes. Like motivation is not reliable. Like if motivation is your training partner, that's a terrible training partner because it's here one day and it's gone the next. So you need more practical strategies to keep you on track, even when you don't feel motivated.
Yeah. Especially, the long-term goals. Those are often the hardest to deal with. And I did a bodybuilding show and I didn't realize how hard it was to lose just even 1 to 2 pounds of weight. I mean, I think people often underestimate that in general and don't realize how much effort does need to go in. And how do you help clients set realistic goals and obviously achievable fitness goals, James?
So, I don't work with people one-on-one. I've had programs. Honestly, the training part was always more the passion project for me because I was more involved on the other side, the business side, first the magazines, then the supplement world, and then starting a supplement company. But I enjoyed helping people because to tell someone to take supplements that's going to help them reach their goal, that's disingenuous. Supplements are just like the name implies, they're supplemental, right? So it's a training nutrition approach and then supplementation. So if I really want to help people, well, then I have to teach people these other things, including the nutrition. And so that's why I started putting together the programs online. The challenge with helping people one-on-one is, there's a bottleneck, which is me, right? I can only talk to so many people. I want to help more people. So I'd rather put educational content out there to be able to help more people. But with that being said, I still have to address this, right? Because this is the number one thing. Before I can teach you about your macronutrients or teach you how to train, we have to address this mindset piece first, knowing that people statistically fall off after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here are things that I share. Like I've got a brand new program. It's called Fail Proof, which some people are like, wow, that's a really audacious name to call it Fail Proof. I've tried a bunch of different programs. What makes yours so special? And the difference is it's not just giving you a plan and expecting you to follow it, especially just blindly follow it. Yeah. So it's more like a master class or a master course, but it's teaching people these principles. So they understand it because you have to have faith in the program that you're following, at least for a certain period of time, because you're not going to see results right away, at least not your goal. So that means that you've got to stick to this plan long enough. So to stick to it, even though you're not quite seeing the results you want, you've got to have faith that you're following the right one. So understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it is very important in my mind when it comes to that sustainability piece. But these are the things we talk about. Everything that you and I are talking about right now, it's preparing them for these things. It's at least getting them thinking about this stuff and saying, you're right. I was building this plan out. And if nothing else in my life went wrong, then yes, I might be able to stick to this. But if any one little thing happens, it's like the wheels fall off. So, that's a big thing. It's and it's also teach him that it doesn't need to be that complicated, because the reality is it doesn't. I learned that a lot of times when I was getting in shape, whether years past bodybuilding shows or getting ready for magazine photo shoots, whatever, I found that I was working too hard. That, it's that old saying, work a little bit smarter, not just harder. Doesn't mean that, again, you still have to work hard, but I think sometimes we have a tendency to make it more difficult on ourselves than we need to. For example, I used to think, I just had to torture myself for weeks and weeks on end of low carb dieting in order to lose fat. And that's not true. So trying to give people an approach that's not torture, because what are the chances of you sticking to something if you hate it?
Very slim.
Yeah. I mean, eventually you're counting down the days until you quit. Yeah. And even a bodybuilding diet. I used to tell people, I'm like, that's one of the weird things about the fitness industry. It kind of started from this epicenter of bodybuilding. A lot of the things that are very mainstream now were things that only bodybuilders did. Like, I used to carry around an ice chest, an Igloo, the red and white old fashioned Igloo ice chest, because they didn't have all these cool 6-pack bags and all this crap now. Everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, what is all that? Why are you packing all your food? They used to think I was like insane. Now you see this is commonplace. People meal prep. Meal prep is a common term. But the reality is, trying to teach someone how to eat and train like a bodybuilder, the way that a bodybuilder is going to train for a competition, to try to get down to ultra low body fat levels for a window this big, literally for a day, 2 days max, maybe 3 if they're going to try to stretch a photo shoot after the show, versus someone who's trying to get in shape and stay in shape. So they're different approaches. Trying to make someone do a bodybuilding style diet and expecting them to stick to it long term is ridiculous. Because even when I would do it, I was counting down the days. I'm like, I can't wait until I have whatever, a pizza by myself.
Yes.
That's what every bodybuilder says. So like, they've got a list in their head of like their top 5 things that they're going to eat as soon as the show's over.
Oh, gosh, James, you are bringing back memories. I was probably 2-3 weeks out from my first show, and I was going on the computer and just looking at fast food and looking at, meals and what I'm going to have. And I will also add that necessarily wasn't the healthiest thing for me. I think I had to try it because I always said I would, and we've had the best bodybuilders in the world on the podcast, so I always wanted to feel what they've kind of been going through. But I think the bodybuilding diet is not healthy, because for that one day I looked great. After that, I was binge eating. I was just getting whatever I could get my hands on, and it was almost bad to a point. I gained a lot of weight. I felt a little mentally better, but I think I see your point on that. Now, I do have 2 final questions, and the first one I'm very interested in. How do you personally stay up with the latest trends and research in the fitness industry? And who do you trust, or who do you kind of listen to update your training methods and all that stuff, James?
So a couple things. So one, you have to follow the latest research. And that doesn't mean going to Google or to PubMed. I mean, on creatine alone, I think there's been thousands of papers published on creatine, just that one single supplement or ingredient. So just finding some random published study doesn't really mean much. You have to go to some of these organizing bodies. So, for example, when it comes to nutrition or supplementation, I go to the ISSN, which is the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which I'm a member of. They also do conferences around the world, but they just had one here in Fort Lauderdale not too long ago in June. When it comes to training, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, American College of Sports Medicine, so you sign up. If you're a member, you get the journals, they send them to you, and you thumb through them. And look, some of this stuff is kind of like old news in some ways, because what I find that's interesting is a lot of the techniques when it comes to training or nutrition are pioneered by bodybuilders who figured it out through trial and error, and they figured out what works. I mean, think about it. You can say what you want about bro science, but at the end of the day, you had a group of people who figured out how to get a result. That's just as important as knowing how to get the result. Like, the science side of it. It's like, no, they figured out how to do it, right? So what I find is there's a bit of a lag time. You'll get this group that figures out how to get the result. And then on the science side, they're like, all right, well, let's substantiate this, let's conduct enough case studies to be able to, validate that. So I'm not one of these people that is, booing on bro science all the time. Yeah, people who are speaking out of place, that are just regurgitating some crap that they heard, like, don't repeat someone else's words and, claim it as your own. First of all, that's called plagiarism.
Yeah.
Have an original thought, think this stuff through, educate yourself, and, better than anything else, personal experience. And that's where, I mean, look, I'm not knocking, the younger generation of fitness influencers, because then I would just sound like the old dude. But, there's some things that just come with experience. And I think about my first 5, even 10 years of training, and I look back on them like, wow, there were a lot of things that I thought I was doing it the right way, and turns out I wasn't. But if you would have asked me back then, I would have been adamant about it. And so now I hear people on social media, because now they have a platform, they got a voice, and they're adamant about it. Mm-hmm. So I think there's got to be this balance between your own personal experience, but remember, that's only a case study of one, me, or whoever that other person is, for them to say, no, this is fact because I did it. Well, it worked for you, but does it work for anybody else? That's like, someone like Mike O'Hearn saying, hey, behind the neck presses, it's okay. I don't think he said okay, but he's like, trainers say you shouldn't do this. Mike happens to be one of those guys that can do it and not injure himself. Does that mean it's true for everybody? No. Case by case, right? So it's a combination of your own personal experience, working with other people, talking to other people that have been in the industry, and then combining that with the science and kind of finding that sweet spot somewhere in the middle. And being open-minded.
Mm. I like that sweet spot.
It's a sweet spot, and it's, and recognizing that, maybe the way you were doing it all along, maybe it's not the best way. I mean, I can tell you this, though, even when I did it the wrong way all those years, still got great results, which says something. Do it with enough effort, intensity, consistency, you're still going to get a result. My 2 rules are really simple. And this is kind of my argument against, should I do partial range or full range, or this style versus that style? 1, do you feel it? If you're training lats, like we talked about, at the end of your workout, do you feel it? Are your lats fatigued or are your arms fatigued? Okay, if your arms are fatigued, maybe we need to address your technique. Here's some tips to help you kind of zero in. What works for me may not work exactly for you, but here's some things where you can figure it out for yourself. Number 2, do no harm. So if you're doing an exercise like Mike O'Hearn doing behind the neck presses, if he can do it without hurting himself, hey, all the power to you. But if you're doing that and, you're starting to feel that twinge in there, probably not the best idea.
And I was going to actually ask my final question, what are some of your biggest, tips for people who are lifting? And I think you answered that question perfectly in 2 pillars, obviously, of the just work, and then obviously the main one, do no harm, because I think injuries are one of the biggest problems for people who are even just getting into the gym, and then it's scaring them away, or they're doing the form wrong and something pops, or God knows, a muscle tears, and they're never going back to the gym. And working on kind of finding that the mind to muscle connection, like we talked about, and making sure that you are working that desired muscle. And James, just such an honor and privilege having you on the podcast, man. I so full of knowledge. You remind me of the other tattooed legend, Jim Stepani, who we had on the podcast. You and him are just damn scientists in the building, and I love it. You're always spitting knowledge, both of you. And before we go, the floor is yours. Where can we find your content? Do you have anything new you're working on? Any new training programs? You obviously talked about the one training program. Any books or anything coming out in the works in the near future, James?
Yeah, so just recently here in the last 2 weeks, launched jamesgrage.com. I crazy enough, after all these years, I never really had focused on that side of the business. So the first program that we launched in that is this program called Fail Proof, which is focused on this. I would say that it is fat loss, but it's not just fat loss. It's fat loss and building lean muscle, which, by the way, you can do at the same time, despite what people tell you. And there's plenty of science to support that. But so there's fail proof under jamesgrage.com. Back kind of doing the YouTube thing again. I took a break for quite a while. I was a little burned out on social media in general, but it's one of those things that I told myself, well, you can either be frustrated by what the industry has turned into, or you can do your part to try to right side it.
Yeah, I like that do what you can do and to inspire just that one person. And James, you've not only inspired one person, you've inspired thousands, maybe millions, who knows? And you've inspired me with your YouTube videos when we were in lockdown and all I had were my resistance bands, and your resistance band workout kicked my ass. And I'm still a little upset at how hard it was. I don't know how many people were actually able to finish that. And if you did James's resistance band and can finish it with the band that you start with, please send me a screenshot or just a DM, and I'll get you something special out. Also, first person to sign up for James's new program on jamesgrage.com, send me a screenshot as well, and we'll get you a special box out to you. I mean, fail proof is going to kick your ass. Be ready. It's not for, is it, what skill level is this for? Is it for all skill levels, James?
That's a great question. So it is, because the foundation of it is nutrition first, which everyone wants to skip past. A lot of trainers want to go right to the workouts because the workouts the fun stuff. And in my opinion, it's also the easy stuff to teach people. Nutrition, there's a lot of layers to it. And, it can be a daunting task teaching someone all the things that they really need to know. So wanted to prioritize that. So it's a combination, like we talked about, mindset, nutrition, training, and even supplementation. What are my supplements that I take? What are all the ones that I think are a waste of money? But the training program is designed with some flexibility in mind. So, if someone is a beginner, they can do it at their own pace and they'll be able to get through it. And that will also give them a goal of how they can progress. But, for someone who wants to challenge themselves, the workouts, they'll kick your ass for sure. And, they're a combination of building lean muscle and at the same time maximizing calorie burn.
Wow. I love it. And guys, those links will be in the YouTube bio. Again, check those out. First person to sign up, send me a DM. We'll get you a special box out to you, and it'll be a Brandon Cooks signed helmet in the box as well. So, I mean, that alone is worth it to me. But maybe you're not a Cowboys fan. Guys, do not forget to follow James on Insta as well. His Instagram will be in the bio. A lot of tips, a lot of advice, lot of advice. Good Lord, James, you're a book full of knowledge, sir. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Until next time, Underdog out.